If you had asked me about this a week ago, I would have said absolutely not. Nope. Welcome back to Unfiltered and Into the Deep, the podcast where we dive headfirst into manifestation, energetics, money, and wealth consciousness through the lens of inner healing, self-leadership, and expansion from the inside out. It's the knowing you got you, no matter what. Abundance isn't something we chase, but it's something we feel with our bank accounts, our businesses, our relationships. It's the way you actually experience life. So let's dive into the deep. I'm going to share with you a process that has happened over this last week here. And again, if you had asked me about this literally a week ago, 7 days ago, I would have been like, no, not on my radar, not on my agenda, not on my intentions list, not on my to-do list, not even on my dream board or vision board if I had one of those, but like in the mind, not on there because I wasn't looking for it. And so I recently joined a mastermind with a beautiful soul who I do deeply respect, and I have been in and out of her work for 5-6 years actually. And I was saying to a beautiful friend this morning of like, it's been a round circle, full circle, because I was in her world, ate up everything she had to share. And it was so amazing and resonated. And then there was a moment in my growth cycle where I was like, I don't know if I resonate. I don't know if I even like this. I don't know if I believe in any of this. And then last week, I was pulled into a moment of silence, some stillness. And this is something I've been doing a lot of. Like if you've been following along for a while, I have taken some silent full days. Like last fall, I took a whole weekend. And I'm really like working at instilling that intentionally throughout my week more regularly. Just quiet. Listening to myself. And there was something that came up in this time of silence last week where I was just sitting and I wasn't looking for anything. But I was looking for some clarity actually. But I wasn't looking for a mastermind to join. And I was looking for like, I was like along the lines of like, what am I going to talk about on the podcast next week? And what is asking to be birthed from me? That sort of thing. And that was I like to set an intention before I go into these quiet moments. And that was the intention. And then this mastermind came in. And I was like, no. We're not doing one of those. And I have been a part of many, many masterminds over the years. I believe in them fully. I love facilitating them. I think they're powerful, and I think there's a time for them. And I think there's a time for your own embodiment and integration of things that you have learned through programs or masterminds or with mentors or coaches, whatever it is. And I think that's really powerful when we take that space to really embody and integrate it. But as I went into this stillness, looking for, my next step of like what's being asked of me to share, looking for something small, something light, something logical, somewhat, but like an intuitive pull. And this is where this came in, right? And so this is where like we can't really plan strategy to a degree. Like I'm not against strategy, but we also have to be open to what's coming through. So like this wasn't a strategic move. It was just clear. So like that's the part that's intuitive. That's the part that's not forced. And I haven't joined a mastermind in this fashion for a while. So I've actually been a part of a few masterminds the last couple of years. And they've been smaller. The first one was smaller, more intimate. It was great. Exactly what I needed at that time. And then this last one has been a little bit of a bigger one in the number of people in the mastermind, but the depth was like really deep. And so I made this like kind of deal with myself a few years ago of like, if I'm going to sign up to work with somebody or on something or like purchase something, even if it's free, the dollar amount doesn't actually matter. I'm going to show up fully in that space. Okay, so I haven't been in this space or season of adding more like this mastermind is. I've been like more like, I'm just so intentional, I guess. So I didn't scale back years ago. And by scale back, I actually like fully stopped my business, right? For like 7 months. And I gave myself full permission to never come back to work. And this will like full circle here, but I feel like this is an important context to this. And so, for about 7 months, when I fully stepped away with full permission to never come back, and we were unschooling the kids and we're traveling and being as a family, and life was really full. It was in a beautiful way, like beautiful, content, complete amazingness. If this is all my life ever is, this is amazing. And what that season actually showed me was like so fascinating in that, and I consciously would have argued this with you. Like I would have been like, no, that doesn't resonate. Before I stepped away from my business in that way, I would have said that my worth was not attached to my business. But when I came home fully, just full-time mom, wife, partner, sister, niece, daughter, friend, I was like, damn it. There was a part of me absolutely tied to the worth, because I became like kind of accustomed to money flowing through my business. And, I loved my clients, loved them. I have amazing clients. I'm so blessed. And so it really didn't make sense to just like walk away. But when I was home for that time and not doing anything in the like external world, I was off social media for months. There was an identity shift there. And then there was identity shift again coming back. And so coming back wasn't about proving anything, but more of like an internal knowing. And there is so much difference in the intention of wanting to be online as opposed to like, well, this is part of my work. It's just natural for me. It was actually so uncomfortable not to post the first few weeks because it like isn't hard for me to post. It isn't hard for me to talk about myself online. It isn't hard to share parts of my life that I feel like sharing with you. I like think there's just so many beautiful things out there that I love having conversations around. But this coming back identity shift, which was now like a couple of years ago, right? It was really from a desire to serve and knowing that I am here with a bigger purpose than being a mom or just a wife or just a sister or just a daughter. Like I am here to help, guide, serve others in a bigger extent. And there is nothing wrong. And I really questioned myself for a few months there. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being fulfilled with being a wife or being fulfilled as being a mom. There's nothing wrong with that. But coming back, there is this devotion, this truth, this impact asking to come from me. And how do I want to deliver that? It was so different coming back from before my business. Like I did need it to some degree, right? We had a lot of financial hardship there. And, like I was so blessed. I got to see massive financial success. And, part of me was like, is that it for that chapter? And now we end that chapter and this is the next. But to come back because of a choice that I really wanted to. And I was really excited, and I really am excited. And so part of this with this mastermind coming up was like, I have such a deep intention with anything that I do now. any hour I spend doing anything, there's an intention behind it. I'm very cognizant of energetic leaks and conversations that I spend a lot of time on, or contemplations that I spend a lot of time on. I do a lot of contemplating. And so, there was that question coming back of like, why isn't it enough to just be this present mom, wife, human? Similarly, I went through this on the weekend of like, why isn't it enough where my business is? Why do I want to grow and expand? And not in a metric sense. It's a really fascinating place to be now. I don't care how many likes I get. I care how many souls I touch. I care how many women are impacted in a positive way that they feel better. And there's a line that like really lands for me. Some of us are meant to be deeply present in our lives. For sure. And I am. And some are deeply expressed into the world. Deeply expressed in the world. See how that lands for you, right? So back to this mastermind. There's an application process. And it took me hours to fill this out. There's only like 7 or 8 questions. But I needed to be very intentional, not casual with it. And again, I was having this conversation with my friend this morning of like, I can fill out an application and I know how to phrase things to be accepted, essentially, or, what they're looking for in a client. And I just could not allow myself. That just feels like a performance when I do something like that. Like, I know the system. I know the buzzwords. I know the non-buzzwords. I know the red flags. I've had application processes in my own business, right? And one of the most important pieces of this for my own self is I brought this to Blake in a really excited partnership way. So I have invested tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds almost. We're probably actually close to a couple hundred thousands of dollars in myself over the last years. Kind of mind-blowing when I think about it, actually. And this process, I just was looking forward to. I'm a completely different person than the last time I invested in a mastermind at this edge for myself. And it's not a financial edge, it's an identity edge. And so I wanted to even do the bank transfer with him. And there's times and seasons for this, but I will absolutely say there are times where I have invested without chatting with him, without sharing with him. And I don't think there's a black or white, right or wrong on this, to be honest. And I've thought about this a lot over the last few days because there's a part of me that always knew I was here to lead in this way, in this expansion, in this portion of our relationship. And he has always been very supportive, but he's also not going to know the same things I know. And I don't know the same things he knows. There will be parts of us that are stronger in these relationships, and we need to go first. And so it's like bringing me back, actually, a long ago memory is when we were struggling so much and he was trying to fix it for us. And I love him for that so much. We were both in that fix it mode. And he had come across, I think his name is Gordon Ramsay. No, that's the chef, Dave Ramsay. And he's a big budgeter. And here I'm learning about money mindset and law of attraction and the depths of universal laws and manifestation, like all of these deep things with money. And he's like, we will schedule, we will count to the penny. We had an envelope for all of our money, for groceries and expenses. Everything was planned out to the penny. And it just felt like locking me in a damn cage. I hated grocery shopping then. It felt so rigid. It was so triggering. And, you know, one of these uncomfortable conversations that we had to have back then, this was probably 6 years ago, maybe even 7, was 2019 maybe. Yeah, so 7. Around like, if I want to buy $11 strawberries, I got to buy the $11 strawberries. If they're really speaking to me, then I just got to buy the $11 strawberries. And back then, 7 years ago, that was like kind of crazy to pay for strawberries. I think we pay that quite regularly now as the world shifts with those things. But he wouldn't have had it on the list, so it wouldn't have been on the grocery list, so then you don't get them. So you don't buy them. Or like, if I see something that looks really good in the grocery store, then I have to just intuitively be allowed to purchase that for myself, because I was learning to like make these decisions, not from a lack place, right? And so just know that there is expansion that happens within relationships here, and one person will always have to go first. And so it was just like a really cool reflection for me this weekend of how much we have grown over these last years, that, you know, there was a part of me that hid those things from him a little bit. I would always share it with him, like afterwards. But, you know, I'm thinking of like the first time I invested 15,000 US for a 3-month container, and he would have died. He would have just crumbled. How do you know that like that's what it was going to be? And it was for like, oh gosh, 12 or 15 calls, and that was it. And to him to like have to justify or rationalize something like that would have made absolutely no sense to him. And I couldn't justify or rationalize it. I just knew that I needed to do it. And that wasn't my first big investment. I had done like probably 30,000 the year before in different things, maybe even 40. And so it wasn't like this was brand new to him, but also his human didn't have capacity to think about holding that and what the ROI, the return on investment, would be at that. Because sometimes a return on investment or an ROI, I love this, is a ripple of impact in our lives. And now he can see in hindsight over these last few years how that really shifts things for us. And so it's not as terrifying for his human, but, you know, he's seen crazy things happen with money in our lives over these last 6-7 years from those investments. And so the ripple of impact has been huge that he can now see in hindsight. And I find this with men a lot too. And women will do this until we kind of decondition ourselves from this a little bit more. And it takes a lot of practice and definitely some effort, because we've been taught to be logical, like pro cons lists, like why should we do this? And, you know, like that sort of thing. It's all conditioned. But as women, and some men do have this too, but as women, we have this intuitive pull. We have this inner this inner fire, and we can't always explain that, articulate that as the human, but the soul knows this is the path and this is where I'm pulled to go. And so similarly with this mastermind, he knew, like when I came down and I was like, I think I'm going to apply for this mastermind. And he was like, cool, do it. And like, no questions asked. And I was like, I'd actually like to talk it through a little bit more with you. And so he kind of chuckled, because he's also used to like, this is how it goes now. But that took years for him to see the evidence that it was worth it. And sometimes it was financial, but sometimes it was more that ripple of impact of how it's affected how I am as a mom, how I am as a wife. Like we've done I joke about like going through a master's degree in like a year of like human psychology and metaphysics and neuroscience, like so many different things, right? But I also want to speak to here that we will talk ourselves in and out of it. So I applied for this mastermind and I was like, okay, I'll put it out to the universe, God. I put my full intention into this application process. Maybe they don't want me. And it was so interesting to just observe the thoughts of like, that's fascinating, Jen. You felt the pull. You just spent almost 3 hours filling that out. And you're already like, maybe I won't be accepted and then I'll get an easy out of this. Because I know there's a big identity expansion tied to this. And so we will naturally, physiologically, neurologically talk ourselves out of this in our head. We'll do the back and forth. And so I was accepted, 4 hours later. And I literally went, shit, with a smile on my face. I'm like, okay, here we go. And I slept on it that night, which I don't typically do. But because I could feel such an identity expansion, I absolutely wanted to be in a really clear space with intention, pressing that pay button and like a celebration of self. Again, not because it's my biggest financial investment, but because I want to honor myself in that expansion process. And so I knew I was in for a weekend of some grief of old identities. I knew, if you know me well or have heard this story before, years ago I invested in a higher end investment for myself, and a week in, and I was like, oh shit, this is not for me. This is not the place I am meant to be. I didn't resonate with how it was run. I didn't resonate with the back end. I didn't resonate with the facilitator. And it was interesting because like I had felt an all in on that investment. And so what was coming up for me on the weekend after now joining this mastermind this weekend on Friday was, what if it's like that? What if I do that? And had I sat with it for like 48 hours before joining after the application, I would have went through the exact same process. Because and I wouldn't have said this to you again a week ago, there will always be a part of us that will question when something didn't work out the way we had intended it to. We will then question if we're really good at making those decisions or if we're actually following our intuition. Now, I know from like reflecting on this for years now that mastermind wasn't meant for me, but I learned so many lessons in that. So did it work out in the way that I thought it was going to, that my little human wanted to control it? No, not even slightly. But now being able to reflect back years later, did it work out exactly how it needed to be? Yep, 100%. My human had a lot that she wanted to experience through that process, to learn from. So just know when you're doing anything, making any big decisions, there's always going to be this like internal dialogue of talking ourselves into it and out of it. And it's much easier to talk ourselves out of it. And then we will tell ourselves it's intuition. I actually have a podcast I recorded on this. Is it Fear or Inner Knowing? I think is what I ended up titling it. I'll link it in the show notes. But it's so good because we'll go back and forth. We hit that expansion edge within ourselves. Our nervous system starts to bring up all sorts of shit. Our physiological self. I actually thought I would get sick this weekend, and I did not. I thought I'd get a headache or like a stomach something or other, because that's typically how things show up for me. Everybody has those. Again, I have another podcast on that if you want to go check it out, of how things will manifest within our body for deeper healing. But I did a lot of sitting with self, not for long periods, just like 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, bringing myself back into my body, noticing, witnessing when I'm in my head. Because the question of joining this mastermind wasn't, do I need this? Because I do not. But do I desire this? Yes. And also my internal dialogue could have made that a no quite easily. But the real question for myself was, am I willing to meet myself here in this mastermind? Which identity is going to show up here? Okay, so none of this is actually about the mastermind in itself. It's about trusting ourselves at a new level. It's about choosing expansion without any evidence. I don't know anybody in this mastermind. I don't know anybody who's done it personally. Could I have looked out if it worked for them? Totally. But no, that's not where I'm at in my journey. Can I say yes before it makes sense? This was also a big one for me because we're looking at moving. I want to move. I'm ready to move to our new property. And so will that be really busy? Yeah, moving takes a lot. And we have a large house we have filled that we live in currently. We're probably at 3,300 square feet at least, maybe even 36. That's a lot of stuff to sort through. And I've done a lot of it. If you've been around for a while, I sorted through a lot of things last year, and I moved with damn certainty towards this property. And, maybe that property will come next month. Maybe it won't. But I could have been like, it's not really logical to join this right now, because I always saw myself expanding after we moved to that property, because that will happen when you switch environments. I know that sure as heck happened when we moved out here. Right? So I could have definitely talked myself out of it for that again. I also had my daughter going on a big trip, leaving her parents behind, no communication for the next week. And so I knew there would be some grief that would come with that. There's total pride, but with pride and independence in our children, there's always like a sliver of grief in there for what was and what's coming. So I will ask you for your own self here, where are you being pulled right now? Think about it. Where are you telling yourself it doesn't logically make sense, so you don't want to do it, or you're not going to do it? And what would it look like if you actually just trusted doing it when you feel the pull for it? For me, this is one of the reasons I'm showing up again in this mastermind space. I definitely don't know anybody in there. And can I let them get to know me? I will. But it's easier to hide. It's easier to I'm always the one in the room that just likes to sit back and observe. It feels like a different level of, can I take up space? And it's not like I'm pretty used to taking up space. I'm online. I have a podcast. I have clients, But can I be brave enough? Can I be courageous enough to be brave like I used to be in the beginning of my business? So let this settle for yourself. Take what feels true for you. And I want you to remember to come back to the knowing that you've got you, no matter what. If this spoke to you, please feel free to share it with someone who might need it too. I know I sure could have used these conversations back in the day. And thank you for being here with me. I truly feel so honored that you come back and listen week after week, time after time. And I honor you for choosing to go deeper. Big love.